It is 6:30, and looks like we likely have a quorum, but if we could do a roll call to make sure, that would be great. Present?
Here.
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 Present.
All right, sounds like a quorum, so I think we're good. First order of business tonight is the meeting minutes from the March meeting. Do we have a motion with respect to them? Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, any discussion, edits? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Sounds like our minutes are approved. Next item is the annual CPA budget appropriation vote. For those who are new, one of our responsibilities every year is to allocate the funds that are projected to be available from the CPA, both combination of the local property tax surcharge and the state match, which have been estimated this year to be a little over $1 million. And it is recommended, or the city has recommended, that we allocate $62,600, which I believe is the maximum we're allowed to for administrative expenses. Allocate $125,200 for each of the three required categories where we have to spend at least 10% of the funds: open space, historic preservation, and community housing. And then assign the rest, the remaining $813,800 to the open reserve for the CPA program. And now those will be the pots of funding that we will draw on in the fall or winter when we're considering this next upcoming round of applications. So if anyone, no one has any questions, if we have a motion on those budget allocations?
I actually have a comment and would like to recommend something different. So the city, that budget that was brought forward represents a 10% contribution into each pot. For folks who are not aware, the city has created something called an Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And in a lot of communities where those exist, the mechanism by which those programs are funded and operated tend to include a variety of sources, but all communities that have both a CPA and an affordable housing trust fund utilize the housing portion of the CPA funds into the affordable housing trust fund. So essentially what communities do is they will take the 10% or whatever that community puts into the housing portion, and they send it over to an affordable housing trust fund, which essentially will manage the distribution of those funds. And then the CPCs in those communities will essentially focus mostly on open space and historic preservation projects and allow the trust funds to sort of distribute the housing portion of the funds. The city adopted an affordable housing trust fund. We don't have that committee up and running yet, but I do anticipate that we will before the CPC reviews its next round of grants. And because of that, I have been, as we were creating an affordable housing trust fund here in Lowell, we're looking into what other communities do. Communities give a spectrum. So some give the minimum 10%, some, Cambridge, for example, where affordability is a serious problem, give 50%. I am actually proposing that this committee consider a 25% contribution that would be set aside specifically for affordable housing. That would represent so Adam was saying, the chair was saying that 10% is 125 too. So a 25% contribution related to affordable housing would be 313,000, I believe. And that's actually what I would recommend with no changes to the minimum set asides for historic preservation and affordable housing, or the rest of the funds that's going to go into the pool. It's something that I'd like this board to consider. unfortunately, with housing being incredibly expensive to build in Massachusetts, even $313,000 isn't going to get you very far when building affordable housing. But one of the interesting things about having the ability to, what we know about CPA funds is that they're available every year. And so if you build it up over time, that can be a significant contribution towards the creation of housing. So I actually am, I guess, making a motion. I don't know if or we should just discuss it, but I am suggesting 25% for affordable housing specifically, and to leave the other recommendations as is, and that the larger pool of funds stay with the CPC as well.
So just two clarifying questions. Is your recommendation, which you absolutely can and should make as a motion, is your recommendation that we just increase the funding that's dedicated to community housing at this stage in the process, or that we also assign it to this Affordable Housing Trust right now, or should we wait and do that at a later point?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think right now we on ordinance, on paper, we have an affordable housing trust fund. That group has not yet been fully established in that it's not full, like we don't have everybody appointed to that board yet. And that group will need to meet similar to the CPC to create essentially the priorities that they're going to be funding. And so based on the discussions we've been having, there is I think a hope that the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund will help support first-time home buyers and the ability to purchase homes. But there's a lot of work before I think the trust fund knows exactly what their rules and regulations and priorities are going to be. And so I think it is a little premature. I would like to recommend that the group set aside 25%, and then at a future meeting, if the trust really is up and running, as I do expect it will be, before we start accepting applications, then at that point, we can have a conversation about potentially sending whatever funds we have set aside for housing specifically to the trust for them to administer.
Okay, that sounds like that's probably the prudent approach at this stage. What would be really useful, I think, whether it's 10% or 25% that we set aside now and whatever we choose to do later, I think it would be really helpful to have some information for the committee about the comparative advantage of channeling the resources through that vehicle as opposed to this one. I think we all probably share the goal that is the intent of that, I'm sure, to address the serious housing needs in the community, but I guess we will want to understand why that will be more effectively done through that tool than this one. So
I'm happy to give folks more information. So, affordable housing trusts are something that are allowed by state law. Communities, there are lots of communities in Massachusetts that have them. Some have them before the state actually came out with its legislation at the state level. So they're not sort of the same in every community. They are very community-based in their priorities and how they function. The plan here in Lowell is to have an affordable housing trust fund that would be made up of representatives from, so it's either like the city manager or his appointee, the mayor or his appointee, a representative from the Lowell Housing Authority or their appointee, and then members from the public, which would come from finance and real estate background. So there's a seat for, I think, somebody that does sort of lending and financing, and somebody else who's been in development previously. So I think there will be a level of expertise related to actual real estate development and housing specifically among the board itself. And so again, they're going to come up with the plan for trusts, but trusts are allowed to do everything from help finance and pre-development all the way through to hard construction costs. And so again, having a group that is focused only on the housing component, that have a background and understanding of finance, and particularly how it relates to real estate, I think is one of the benefits of having those funds kind of go through that. We've been modeling the planned application, I guess, for the trust, very similar to what we already accept on the city level for our home funds. And so it's something that folks that are looking for project funding would be, it's a sort of system or a standard that they're familiar with. And so, to me, having a group that's focused only on housing and then allowing this group to focus its efforts on historic preservation and open space allows for, I think, a more deeper dive into some of the real estate deals. And I think this group has seen that we've had some projects that we have funded that for a variety of reasons kind of didn't work or haven't sort of moved forward at the level that they would have, and maybe had somebody with like a lot more finance background in real estate been looking at that they could have like flagged some things that maybe this group we don't necessarily have the expertise. We're not here because we're real estate folks. So it's something that I think that would work well. It's also something that does work in other communities, right? So what we're talking about, what I'm suggesting is something that a lot of communities in the Commonwealth are already doing and have been doing for quite a long time, and it functions really well. It essentially would also, for real estate purposes, this group accepts applications at a certain time of year, and we have our process. Real estate doesn't work like that. Sometimes people pull financing together at different times, and so the other benefit of an affordable housing trust is that they often will accept applications on a rolling basis, which allows for projects to come forward to them when those projects are available, not at a set grant deadline, which we also know based on historic applications to this group don't always align with what developers are looking for. So to me, it seems like it's a good fit and something that, at least based on the research that I've done, makes a lot of sense for us to consider.
So is there a motion somewhere in there?
People had other questions, though, yeah.
Well, typically, we have a motion on the floor and we discuss the motion.
Okay,
so.
great. Well, then I am going to make a motion, so my motion would be
So you want to put
25%.
313,000 to community housing,
Correct.
which would leave, instead of 813, 625,800 in the open reserve.
Correct. That's my motion.
All right? And the other numbers, just for reminding, 62,600 for administrative expenses, 125,200 for open space, and 125,200 for historic preservation. So now, discussion. I think I saw Member Tenzar raise his hand first, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. What's the 62 grand for the administrative expenses? Because I look at that, I'm like, okay, not sure what the hell it is.
Do you want to address that since it's your?
It pays for the staff time to administer this board. So we are allowed to charge the trust, the CPA funds to cover staff costs for administering the board. So it literally will pay for the staff time it takes. Yep.
Yeah.
And it doesn't pay for the committee.
Well, actually, Dan, all but you get paid. You didn't-
That's absolutely fair.
1 penny each.
Exactly. When I hear what you're saying, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund sounds like it's a great idea. However, my first response is we don't have any information regarding it other than what you've proposed, other than what you've said. It really hasn't, I guess, it's just starting to be created. So it almost feels premature to be voting this, and why shouldn't it be part of what we did last year? Why shouldn't the Affordable Housing Trust Fund submit an application like everybody else, and then we decide when we go through that process? I mean, to me, that just feels like the way it should be done. I'm not disputing maybe 313,000 makes sense. I don't know. Because I'm not weighing it against all of the other proposals. So my view is it feels like it's probably a good idea because we do have issues with issues regarding open space and historic preservation as well, that need to be addressed. So I guess there's no question there. I guess it was more discussion.
That's okay. That's why we're all members here. We should be just expressing opinions as well as asking questions. I think Member Shea had his hand up as well.
I'm just listening, and first of all, I think what has been stated here makes a lot. I think what's been stated here makes a lot of sense. If we vote approval on this item tonight, which I'll be voting for, it just seems that they have to bring this eventually before the city council. And the city council, I think, is doing their budget probably next month, so I think it's, I think it makes a lot of sense what they're trying to accomplish. And I think the explanation given is pretty clear, and it's just a step in the right direction. And everyone realizes the housing crisis is a crisis. So I just think to vote on it tonight would be appropriate in order the city council could see the vote before they do their budget. And I think they do their budget next month. So it's just,
Which is next month. I think Member LaLasher?
I did. I wanted to speak to the validity of the motion as far as the creation of the Affordable Trust Fund makes a lot of sense, and I think the professionalism that Member Baez-Rose discussed is absolutely a benefit. This board, I think, while we all are doing our best to make sure we know as much as possible, affordable housing and real estate and finance in general, could use additional expertise, and whether that was through the form of adding those types of roles to this board or creating a subsect, I think that makes a lot of sense to professionalize it. What I would want to check and see if there would be ability to amend the motion, because it is in the early stages, my goal would be to fund it to the 10% instead of 25%, and then give us the chance to fund it at a higher level in the future. And my only reason being, I'd like to see that be built out, and then let us decide going forward. I think the open space, when I joined this board, I can speak for myself personally, working towards open space preservation is my passion and one of the areas I want to make sure we focus on, and we did a really good job through ARPA doing that. So the planning board has done a good job, or the planning department has done a good job. I just don't want to necessarily hamstring ourselves with the ability to continue to fund those moving forward just yet until we have the full details on exactly what the group was. I would fully support funding it. I would just see if the maker of the motion would be amenable to doing it 10%, or if we want to take a vote and then go from there.
Let me just clarify. I believe the motion on the floor is actually technically has nothing to do with the Affordable Housing Trust. The motion on the floor is to set the budget for next year. And the only thing that's different from what we have done in past years is that the proposal is that we're going to assign a minimum of 25% of our total funding to affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
This does not necessarily translate to we're going to give it to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay.
If it ever is formed. That will be a subsequent conversation. We can go ahead, and I think the argument for the 25% right now is it puts down a marker, I think, about the importance of affordable housing in the community at the moment. The argument to do what we always do is we can always put more toward affordable housing, as we often do. What we are required to do by the law is to put at least 10% of our funds to it. So if you want to discuss with the maker of the motion making any change to the percentages,
Yeah, I think
let us know what
my
where we stand.
my clarifying would be, for me to be comfortable, I would want to keep it at 10% for this budget purpose, allowing the flexibility for us to enhance that throughout the year. I do believe just showing that we started the process of funding it, I believe puts down a marker. I understand completely why trying to go at a higher level can be beneficial. For me, just because of my focus on open space, I would like to keep it at 10%, but that's just my comment. Thank you.
I guess I'll turn it over to the maker of the motion to respond to that.
I don't want to change it.
Okay? Right. Did you all have, before we go circle back around, I want to give you guys a chance.
I mean, I would support it, just because, yeah, I mean, the whole affordable housing, it is a crisis, and I would really, I mean, on a personal level, really love to see a lot more funds and support going towards it.
Member DeJesus, any comment?
Yeah, I agree with Giovanni with this trust fund, the dollar amount too, the percentage. Coming from a background of housing, with the cost of properties and the cost of construction is so high, I don't think it make too much of a dent, but it will help a lot of people who couldn't really afford it, and I'll go with it.
Member Tenzer? Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that 813,000, or whatever the number is gonna be, that is something that can be used for any category.
Correct. And also for recreation.
Okay, all right. I'm still where I'm at, go figure. So I can't support the motion, but I just assume tell you.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion?
My other question for consideration would be if we think that the affordable housing is going to need, well, I guess my first question would be, this is an annual budget appropriation, so this is something we could amend if we decided this year, and so we have that before us. But if 313,000 or 125,000 is barely going to put a dent in affordable housing, my question would be, could we put a bigger dent in historic preservation or open space by keeping that money here? And in my opinion, we could, and that was why I would be supporting that side. But I support the idea, and I'm for the idea.
Just to clarify, because I think I may have messed up, did we actually get a second on this motion before we started discussing it? So,
We did
I'm sorry. I think
To make it look good, I'll be the guy who seconded the motion, and then, yeah. just so
Member
we have
LaLasher has
discussion,
seconded, for the record. All right. Any further discussion? All right, well, I guess I think we definitely need a roll call. And just for clarity again, the motion on the floor is the budget appropriations. It is not to allocate any money to any particular project or the Affordable Housing Trust at this point. 62,600 for administrative expenses, 625,800 for the budgeted reserve, 125,200 for open space, 125,200 for historic preservation, and 313,000 for community housing. I think we need a roll call. Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
We got it, that's next. All right, believe the motion carries. So our next item is also budget-related. In the very first season of community preservation action here in Lowell, we actually did one of the most significant projects that we have done yet as a committee, which was to authorize, I think it was about $1.5 million to go to help with the acquisition of the Rowley's Farm property that has now begun to become a really significant recreational and educational and open space resource in the Pawtuckettville neighborhood. The way we were able to allocate that much money, given the numbers we were just talking about, was that the Community Preservation Act allows CPCs and the communities that they're part of to actually borrow against future funding. And so that is a way to do larger projects of longer duration. And we agreed to borrow for 2 projects that year, actually. This is the first one that's coming to us. The second one was the windows of the stained glass windows, and actually in the council chambers and other parts of the city hall. We haven't seen that one yet, but I'm sure it's coming. And the city, I guess, has now finally done the borrowing for the Rowley's Farm, and now has the debt schedule to go with it. And this year's, as in the upcoming year, fiscal '26, the combination of debt principal and interest payments will be a total of $87,462.08. We need to authorize, or I don't know if we authorize or recommend allocating that out of our minimum open space allocation. That doesn't mean we can't use some of the open reserves for other open space, remember the last year? But we do need to authorize that. That is a commitment that we and the city council have made. We don't have a whole lot of discretion about it, but the vote needs to happen. So if we could get a motion to that end, I'd appreciate it.
Does it need to come out of a certain category?
Well, it doesn't, but what we've encountered in recent years where we've had minimal applications for open space, and this was part of why the committee several years ago felt it made sense to borrow against it, is we recognize that in a heavily developed city that doesn't actually have a tremendous amount of open space to acquire, it made sense to actually commit future years' resources, knowing that we were going to have to spend 10% every year. And I think for the last couple of years, we've had very little in the way of open space applications. So I think I would strongly recommend that we allocate it out of the open space pot, but if the committee feels it prefers to put it in the reserve pot or have it come from the reserve pot, that is, the committees can do that. 87,462 and 8 cents. So we all have to collect our salaries. That'll be the 8 cents.
I make a motion to recommend to the city council to approve the appropriation of funds of 87,462.08. That would be whatever that other category is.
General?
The general fund.
Second.
Do we have discussion on that motion?
No discussion, but I do think it's probably worth mentioning that I think we're going to have this debt service in place until June of 55. Just as an FYI.
30-year borrowing.
No.
Well, I'm gonna argue that I'm not gonna support this motion because I actually, while I do obviously support funding this debt, I think it's in the committee's interest to maintain flexibility. And while we can spend as much as we want out of that budgeted reserve on future open space projects, if we take this out of that, the 125 that remains is going to only be able to be used for future open space projects. And if we don't get any applications, that means we've essentially taken $85,000 that we could have put to good use, and then we can't use it. We can't touch it because we don't have applications for it. If we do get the applications for the 125 or more this year that are good projects for open space, we can do that out of the reserves. But knowing the pattern we've had in recent years, I'm personally going to oppose funding this out of the budget reserve. But we can take a vote, and I don't mind losing.
If comment's still open, I would just say, sorry.
I was just going to ask the chairman a question. Could you tell me when the second payment is due?
So it's the way the debt schedule appears, there are 2 payments every fiscal year. So we're going to see a total of a similar number. It's slightly different every year, I don't know why, but a similar number each fiscal year that we're going to have to allocate.
What I was referring to was the notes, and they indicated the second payment was be due on March 1st, 2025. Should that be 2026?
Oh, yeah, I believe that was a typo. The debt schedule that we got actually showed it as 26.
That's all, I just wanted to, because that's,
Thanks.
thank you.
We're not late.
So I would make a comment to the reason I support the motion coming out of the general fund. In recent meetings, city council meetings, discussions, and others, I think there's become a groundswell to try to utilize as much money as possible for open space. I think councilors are starting to make that clear. I know, again, I'm advocating for almost forcing our hand, and I'm doing that on purpose, for trying to ensure that we are, I think, community preservation. I think open space is the number one reason for the committee, in my personal opinion. And so trying to work towards that goal as opposed to the historic preservation, which speaks with preservation, so I believe that's right. But the affordable housing piece, I'm very excited from the previous conversation because I think that being in a different set of hands is the right way for this to go long term. So I agree with the motion specifically because I would like to see us have to spend money on open space. And so that's my reasoning.
Very good. Any other discussion? All right, I think we need a roll call on this one. No.
Yes.
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 I'll say yes.
All right, the motion carries. Okay, I'm going to ask that we take the next items on the agenda slightly out of order, because I think we have a whole bunch that are fairly straightforward, and then we have the larger discussion about the CPA plan. So I'm going to suggest that we move the CPA plan discussion to the end of the conversation tonight. Is there any objection to that? All right. Then the next item then is an extension request for the 44 Princeton Boulevard St. George Greek Orthodox Church. The city of Lowell is requesting a 2-year extension be granted for the 44 Princeton Boulevard CPA grant agreement. Do we have a motion on that? Member Tenzar.
Before the motion, we have discussion.
We can, again, usually we do that after we have a motion, but we can do it before if you want.
Make the motion.
All right. Do we have a second?
Sure, I'll second.
All right. It's not open space, I know, but.
Might be coming.
All right,
Yes.
Member Tenzar.
All right, I saw all of these, and I don't know what the past practice has been. When I see this, I'm wondering, what are we doing? Why are we delaying everything? Why aren't these projects getting done? So my question, I guess, to everybody is please inform me, enlighten me, something. I just don't know why.
I'll jump in. So CPA funds are not tied to like fiscal year spending in the same way that city sort of general funds are. And so when the CPA votes to approve projects and has, in the past, we've never included within that vote a stipulation that the projects are completed within a certain time frame. And it's not required of us to do so. For contracting purposes, the city generally does have deadlines, for when a sort of grant agreement is gonna be completed. And so logistically, what happens is after this committee makes its recommendations and the council does its thing, we move forward on creating actual grant agreements that are between the city of Lowell and the party that was awarded funds through this group. And those agreements can't just be sort of never ending. And so the city has actually put in place grant deadlines. The first year, I think, did only 1 year grant agreements and realized very quickly that was not going to be really helpful. And so we pushed to have grant agreements have at least a 2-year term. And so if anything, this is something that the city, it's sort of like an extra layer of work that the city itself put on these grant agreements, which is why these groups are coming for the extensions, because they haven't been able to move their projects forward. That being said, this group can, I think, decide, if we do want to have more conversations with applicants about their timelines. And I think we can consider, obviously, these are requests that, that require votes. So this group could, vote no, and then we would recoup those funds. And so I do think there's a question for the group to consider whether or not the CPC wants to add a layer that's in addition to kind of the law department's just standard 2-year grant agreement, and or if we want to start implementing, like, you're only going to be allowed 2 extensions before, those are conversations for this group to have, but logistically, it's a matter of there is a grant agreement. It is with the city of Lowell, and it just cannot have just an indefinite date. So 2 years has been what's been rolled out, and it's my understanding that, I'm not sure that a request has been rejected to date, if I'm being honest.
I'm not sure. I think this is the first time we've had, requests for extensions that have come to the board. But, and I think the other thing I would add to that in terms of setting aside the sort of city contracting mechanics, the nature of the kinds of things that this committee funds, many of them are fairly complicated real estate projects that require a kind of a whole menu of sources. And I think in our discussions with applicants, we frequently have heard of how they're trying to use the indication of city support that comes with a modest commitment from us for a budget that is considerably bigger than ours on many of these cases. And they're using that to go to other funders and try to solicit additional funding that they would not have a good reception if they didn't have that show of city support. But that process they're then subsequently seeking the funding under takes time, often a lot of time, because there are these, particularly the affordable housing sources, are in very high demand relative to the supply. So people will often, it'll take several years of applications to be able to get the funding together to execute the project. So it's not unreasonable in a lot of these cases that the projects are of kind of longer duration than the 2-year contract. Then we also have, I think, at least one on the back, the Downtown Lowell Building Restoration Fund, which is not the subject of the motion at the moment, but that's that, and I think we have a fund we created in the first year for first-time home buyers, both of which are kind of revolving programs, and they're sort of subject to when there's demand and when there's not demand, and we kind of want to sustain those programs going forward for the benefit of the city. That was, again, part of the thinking in that first year when we were kind of setting up some sort of institutional structures. We didn't really expect those programs were going to end after 2 years. So the reasons are a little different by project, but I don't think in general that they're indications of, the project's no longer important, or the people, the project proponents have been dragging their feet, or, doing something wrong. I think it's just that it takes a long time to put these projects together and make them happen. Any further discussion on 44 Princeton Boulevard? All right, we have a roll call on that one.
Chairman Backey,
Yes?
Vice Chair Lazarus,
Yes.
Member DePizza,
Yes.
Member DeJesus,
Yes.
Member LaLatcher,
Yes.
Member Shea,
Yes.
and Member Tenza. Yes.
Next one is an extension request for Clemente Park. City of Lowell is requesting a 2-year extension be granted for the Clemente Park grant agreement. We have a motion
I'll make that motion.
and a second.
Second.
All right, any discussion on that one? Member Tenzar?
It's Clemente Park, it's the city of Lowell. How do we not, have this, under control? I mean, they initially got the funds, the city's doing the work, so why the extension, I guess, is my question. Why wouldn't the funds just go to the city for the work that they're doing?
I'm going to answer that since these park projects are being managed by my department. The Clemente Park and the following request is for O'Donnell Park are both projects that are being funded primarily through city ARPA funds. That was the main source of funding, and then we got some CPA funds to help supplement those project budgets. Timing-wise, just for construction purposes, we're constructing this year. Neither of these actually need a 2-year request because we're legally obligated to have the funds spent down by the ARPA deadline, which is the end of 2025. And we are on track to do that for both projects. But for consistency's sake and for just clarity, signing off on a 2-year extension just makes everything a little bit more straightforward. Yeah.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call on that one. Yes?
Yes.
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 Member LaLatcher,
Yes.
Member Shea, and Member Tenza. Yes.
All right, next one up is an extension request for O'Donnell Park, as just discussed. City of Lowell is requesting a 2-year extension to be granted for the O'Donnell Park grant agreement. Do we have a motion on that one?
It's open space. I'll take that one.
All right, we have a second. All right, Member DeJesus. Any discussion on that one? Give Member Tenzar a minute, see if you. All right.
I'd really like to give Matt a high.
All right, roll call, please.
Chairman Backey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lazarus,
Yes.
Member DePizza,
Yes.
Member DeJesus,
Yes.
Member LaLatcher,
Yes.
Member Shea, yes, and Member Tenza. Yes.
All right, next one is an extension request for the Downtown Lowell Building Restoration Loan Fund. City of Lowell is requesting a 2-year extension be granted for the Downtown Lowell grant agreement. Do we have a motion on that one? Member Tenzar, do we have a second?
Second.
And Member DePisa. Any discussion on that one? All right, roll call, please. Yes?
Yes.
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 All right, next one is an extension request for the Hadley House, project of the Lowell Housing Authority. City of Lowell is requesting a 2-year extension be granted for the Hadley House grant agreement. Do we have a motion on that one?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a
Oh,
second?
that's okay. Matter of fact, I don't mind just saying a few words about this.
Is that a second first?
Do I second the motion?
I'll be glad to second it.
All right, very good.
Thank you. For 10 or 15 years, the Lowell Housing Authority has attempted to restore the Hadley House. And 2 years or so ago, maybe 3 years ago, the legislature passed a piece of legislation letting the Department of Conservation and Recreation to sell a piece of land. And some people here know very much, they know exactly the details of this complicated situation. But presently, if you fast forward to today, the Housing Authority is in a position to hire an appraiser to give us an appraisal on the piece of land that up off Broadway Street. So the negotiations will continue, and that's what necessitated the 2-year extension request. Other than that, the committee has approved $150,000. I think it was 2 years ago. And so in order to keep control of the $150,000, that's the purpose of the request by the director of the housing. And so I think that's a brief summary of it seems like yesterday we were before the Veterans Committee talking about the 4, it's going to be either 4 or 5 units up there. And now 2 or 3 years have gone by, and we're still trying to work out the details to buy the land. And hopefully we can get the appraisal and hopefully acquire the land to move forward with the funding. And the funding is very complicated. It's complex. There's different agencies that are going to be contributing to this very expensive project, but worthwhile. And so I think that's the best way to explain it. Thank you.
I'd like to just make a comment on this one, that I'm going to abstain on this one because my agency is actually I'm abstaining on that end as well, but my agency is the one that's actually managing, facilitating the real estate transaction on behalf of the state. So just to eliminate any appearance of conflict, I will be abstaining from voting on this one. Any other discussion? Member Tenzo?
Based on Mr. Shea's recommendation, this sounds like it's a worthwhile proposal. I don't know anything about the Hadley House. I'd welcome any enlightenment on that as well. I don't know where the area is and what it's for. What's the idea behind acquiring the parcel?
Because the Hadley House was moved down to Broadway Street, and it was left on a piece of land owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts under the direction of the Conservation Administrator. I think our chairman knows a little bit about that. And so you can't build a house, you acquire the land, and there's been a long-winded process to try to acquire the land. Some people wanted an arm and a leg for a piece of land, so we said, let's get an appraisal and we'll take it from there. So that, and then it came to Todd Chan's attention a month or so ago that the 2-year on $150,000 has been voted is expiring. So that's the That's the reason for the letter, and that's the reason for the extension.
Just to add a little color, the Hadley House is on Broadway Street, just east of Lowell's, UMass Lowell's South Campus. It was moved there in the 1990s by the city, actually, to make room for, I think, the Hadley Park project at the time. And it was moved onto a piece of land that is protected under Article 97, which is part of why it's been such a cumbersome and lengthy transaction. It's so complicated, because it's got to be
Mr.
worked through there.
Also add for the record with my colleague, the 4 or 5 units that are going to be developed, it's for disabled veterans. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this one? All right, roll call, please. Yeah, I think I have to verbally abstain. Abstain.
Yes.
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 Enthusiastic, yes.
All right, so the last item of business this evening, well, I think the last substantive item, is we had a couple meetings ago, or maybe the last meeting, there was some discussion of the CPA plan, and for some of the newer members who hadn't been here when we worked with the city's planning staff to create it, that's intended to be a document that guides the priorities and thinking of this committee. It should be also a document that guides the folks who apply to this committee for projects to try to align their projects with what the preservation plan indicates is, the desires of the community. And it was a plan that was developed with, I think, a really robust public engagement process that the DPD just did a phenomenal job with at the time, reaching a really broad cross-section of the community, and the input from those folks is what led to what's identified in that plan, emphasizing priorities. And we do make modest adjustments to it for essentially, call it housekeeping, getting the members list correct and the city council list correct and things like that. And that circulated, I think, about a week ago or so to the members, was a version of it that made those edits. And I think we want to, if nothing else, we want to vote this evening to consider those edits. But we also, I think, a meeting or two ago discussed that members of the committee may have input on, shifts in priorities and things that we might want to emphasize differently, including open space, apparently, on the plan. So this is really meant to be a chance to have some of that discussion. And I think maybe it would be wise in this case to have the discussion and see if a motion is larger than just the edits that have been proposed so far. So with that, are there any comments from members?
I think my comments will be clear. I think there's an opportunity here for us to expand. I know there have been conversations about a tree committee being created in the city of Lowell. There are conversations around other potential opportunities that we can expand the usage of what the city may apply for open space and what would still fit. So as those things are developing, we have a sustainability group now that we didn't have back when this was first created. So there are just other things that have now been created inside the city in the last 5 or 6 years that might give us the opportunity for a deeper dive, a deeper review, to look and see if those priorities stick in the idea of community preservation, and in a way that it could expand kind of what the city then may want to be applying for when we come specifically for open space. For clarity's purposes, because I have had conversations with the DPD director on this subject. To my right, the lovely woman, the lady to my right. Almost all of the open space in the city is owned by the city. To be able to do it through a private entity, there are a lot of steps that would have to be followed in order for a private open space to apply to do something with this committee. So anything we're looking at that's going to be open space is going to be city-owned. The continuous maintenance of said open space, that's not something that would be eligible. So we're looking at upgrades and things along those lines. And while we all expect that budgets will change and go up and go down, we were blessed to have an infusion of ARPA money to sink into our open space. Now that that is no longer going to be here, we were able to tackle some large projects that are fantastic. I just would like to keep the flexibility for us to stay in that focus, specifically with this committee. So that's what I've just noticed, like I say, over the 5 years, there have been a couple other things that have been added as priorities in this city that we may have an opportunity to look to include into this plan.
Member Tenzar.
Going through it, I think I told you guys the last time, I didn't realize we had a plan, and going through it, I would agree with the chairman's comments. This was well done, and it was done in such a way that it's almost like fitting a kid with a shoe. You give it sufficient room so it can grow, the kid can grow. Don't call it a name. So I did notice that. I also noticed that there were surveys done in, I think it was 21 and 22, and they said exactly what Member Lowell said, much to my chagrin. But they did say that the major point they brought out was open space. They also mentioned housing, affordable housing on a secondary basis, and not too far behind, but it appeared from the results of the surveys that the residents and people that were approached seemed to indicate that open space is a priority. As far as the plan itself, I'm not sure that there's anything more that can or should be done for that matter. It feels to me like this is a great template, and then it's just a question of how do we use it. That was my impression when I read it. I agree with the comments of Member Olasha as far as open space and recreational stuff. I think, unfortunately, like what was described, we're almost like throwing more on the plate of the city of Lowell, because it's up to the city to come up with those plans and figure out what's the next project. What's after O'Donnell, what's after Clinton. Is it Hadley? Is it more on the North Common? Or we did some work on the South Common as well. But just as an overall impression, I thought it was a nice blueprint, and then just the question will be is what do we do with it going forward?
Other comments? Any?
No, I agree. I think it's just a more succinct and robust document. I think the improvements, honestly, are really, really good improvement.
I have a couple of comments, questions, I guess. Hearing one idea that comes to mind a little bit from the comments of Member Lalasher, mentioning some of these other committees and groups that are either new or maybe newly energized. There might be a certain amount of like a marketing thing that I feel like we don't do a tremendously good job year to year of making people aware of the opportunity. And obviously the city staff is aware, but in keeping with Member Tenzar's concerns about not overburdening them, I could see, soliciting directly a tree committee or a sustainability group to put forth something about their priorities, because I highly doubt those groups have any funds of their own. But if they could identify that, hey, this is something that's really important to us, and maybe put that forward to the Community Preservation Committee, so maybe we can make an effort, perhaps through the administratively funded staff or something, to just make sure that that those folks are aware of the opportunities. That might be really helpful. The discussion of the Affordable Housing Trust feels to me like something, if we're going to make the scale of commitment that's been contemplated, or at least was raised as a possibility tonight, that actually feels like something that we might want to back up by having some content in the plan that speaks to that. So if there is going to be a recommendation going forward that it's going to be in the city's interest, and it's going to be a more effective way to meet the city's affordable housing needs, to make a kind of an ongoing commitment to bolstering an affordable housing trust using CPA funds, at the scale we're talking about, that's something that probably should be actually identified in the plan, as opposed to just, yeah, it's housing, and the plan says we like housing, you know? So that might be, maybe when, if I could ask Giovanni, when you're working with your team to come back to us at a future meeting with an actual recommendation for the Affordable Housing Trust, maybe we also have a recommendation for some language change to the plan at that time that complements that.
Yeah, absolutely. We could definitely do that.
And then the last comment I had in thinking about our plan was created at a time when the federal funding picture was different than it has been for the last few months. And I don't know for certain the degree to which the federal block grant resources are being impacted by changes in Washington, D.C., but there's historically been a little bit of an overlap between some of those federal programs and what the CPC does. And I don't know if we need to make any change or comment or take any different action given the threats to those programs. And I guess that's sort of a question for the vice chair here.
So first, I'd like to talk about your first comment, which is related to like marketing and sort of getting the word out. The city is currently undergoing an open space and recreation planning process, which is going to be like a year-long planning process where we're going to have consultants and be doing work in-house, which is going to essentially help us lay the groundwork for what the plan is for the next like 10 years of open space projects, and that will include a significant amount of community outreach and pop-up tents at parks and gathering feedback, and it's going to be a really long and intensive process. But we've been working off of the existing plan for the last several years and have made a lot of progress. And so I think, it's important for everyone on this committee, since we are going to be on the receiving end of applications related to open space, to be aware that that process is happening and participate in that. But also, I think, is something that I can definitely talk to the staff about, ensuring that when they're doing that outreach and talking to people in the community, that they're also kind of slipping in, and hey, did you know that we have a CPC group and that we have grants available? And I think one of the things that is important to note, that yes, the city is responsible for a majority of the open spaces that we have, but private folks are allowed to apply for CPC funds. The important thing is that they need to know that they're committing to making their space available and open to the public. And so, but they are eligible for that. And so we can use the open space planning process as an opportunity to get the word out, I think. Related to federal funding, it's a little hard to know. Things are changing quite a lot. We have been informed that at least for this coming fiscal year, we should anticipate having funds that are similar, at a similar level to previous years, and so that is the way the team is kind of moving forward, and that's our assumption for this coming year. After that, the picture is significantly less clear. The president's recent budget release completely eliminates the community development block grant program, for example, 100% gone. And so obviously if that, that had been previously floated in a previous term and didn't come to life, right? And so it's a little bit unknown. We are being cautious and sort of hesitant, but not really changing course on anything yet, because we don't have any information that would tell us right now that we definitely need to. And so for us, I think federal funding right now, we're just sort of on an I don't know, and we'll see kind of point. And also some of the language that had been typically used in grant applications and those kinds of things are being reworked in order to ensure that we're still eligible for federal funds. But that's also kind of a day-by-day wait and see kind of thing right now. So I don't have I can't say with a lot of clarity how it's impacting what we're doing yet, because right now it's not, but it could very quickly impact a lot of things. And we just don't have enough information yet coming out from the federal government, either through our representatives or frankly the program managers that we work with on like from HUD and stuff, for example. So nothing changes right now, but maybe it will, which is not an ideal answer.
No, I mean, I think the fact that those programs operate essentially, the city fiscal year is a year behind the federal fiscal year that's funding it, gives us some room.
Yep.
But I think we should, I guess I'll say on behalf of the committee, I think I can speak on behalf of the committee, that because our mission is so well aligned with the missions and intent of some of those programs, we would welcome if we can help in risk, if there's something we can do to help cushion the blow, if there is indeed going to be a blow, when maybe we should bring that back and think about that. So, all right. Any other comments or discussion? Member Shea?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the record, I'd like to just, for the record, indicate that I was so impressed with this plan that was submitted to us. I read through it, and it's pretty informative. And so the staff should really be commended, because there was a lot of work put into this. And some of the facts, it was a learning process for me. I learned quite a bit, but I just wanted just to say that on the record, that that's pretty impressive. Thank you.
Member Tenzar? Did someone have a hand up over here? No? Okay.
So I had two thoughts. One was on the Affordable Housing Trust language. Are you looking to indicate that we're going to fund it at the same level, or are you looking to indicate that we want to recognize the importance of it? Is that what the type of language you were looking for?
What I was actually suggesting was that when the city is prepared to come back to us, having more developed the Affordable Housing Trust and developed what their request for how the CPA will contribute to it, that ought to be accompanied by some suggested language for the plan to acknowledge it. But I don't think tonight is the appropriate time to take action on that.
The second thing was probably a question for the vice chair is, we were talking about open space and recreational type projects. My question was, are there any, like, we know what we have on the ground right now, we know what we're doing right now. Are there any that even if it's a small project, that we can look at, that we could dedicate some CPA funds potentially through an application by the city for maybe some small areas across the city, and areas that haven't been impacted yet. And I was just wondering if there are any sort of capital projects. We know you guys have ideas, so I guess the question is that something that could be forthcoming in the fall that we could deal with?
So I don't think that we're going to be far enough along in the open space planning process to really have concrete things identified. What we do have is sort of a pipeline of projects. So we know, South Common had, for example, a master plan that, based on the grant resources, took 4 or 5 phases and is undergoing design for the next phase of that project. So many of the ARPA projects that are being constructed this year, what we're construction is actually phase 1 of those projects. So all of them, with the exception, I think, of the Jackson Street Park, which is a small park that's going to be created as a new open space in downtown. The rest of them are going to be multi-phase projects. And so I would anticipate that we'll be seeing some of that. DPD also works very closely with the folks in the Parks Department to ensure that when I would think it's unlikely, I guess what I will say is I think it's unlikely that DPD or the Parks Department would come to the CPC with a request for those smaller scale projects. To me, those are easier done through capital capital funds and projects, and that what we would likely be coming to this group for would be these larger projects where we're kind of pulling together multiple resources, and this is one of them, to do larger scale projects. I think that we've got a better handle with capital funds on some of the smaller scale, kind of scattered site, smaller improvements, as opposed to coming to the group for what we have in the past, which are much larger renovations to parks. And I anticipate that that's certainly the direction that DPD has been given as far as coming forward for these funds.
I have a question for the staff, because I think some of this discussion is maybe raising a question of where do things get categorized. A number of the projects that are being mentioned or cited as examples, I think are eligible under the recreation category, not under the open space category, because the open space category under this program is specifically about adding permanently conserved land, like Raleigh's, or actually on a totally opposite end of the spectrum, if a new park is created that is not currently a park, even if it's small. And we funded one, Jackson Street would be a good example, actually. We funded one over on, at the Worthen, the Whistler House, in the first year, where they actually created a small additional park and added it as permanently public open space, and so it was eligible as open space. But if we're improving an existing park, I believe it's eligible as a recreation project, but it doesn't count toward that open space expenditure category. So as we think about, again, last time I'll mention it tonight, but the reason I didn't want to vote for putting the other money, the Rowley's debt service, to the general category is it's a really narrow type of project that fits into that 10% for open space. And most of what we're talking about, and he's not here, so it's not fair to talk about it, but I believe most of what he's interested in is actually going to fall under the recreation category and won't count toward that 10% either. But we'll figure that out as we come along, and I think we'll have another shot at sorting that all out when we see what applications we have this year. So,
I did just have one comment now that I'm revisiting this. The housing section in particular. Well, the open space and recreation section does reference the city's open space and recreation plan, which I think is still active and is still the plan that we're operating under right now until, next year when we have a finished plan. So at some point, I think we'll probably want to update the reference to that to ensure that it's referring to the most current version of the plan. But the housing section does actually refer to the Sustainable Lowell 2025 master plan, which is not our current master plan anymore because we have a new master plan and we have updated it. And so it should really be talking about Lowell Forward and the housing goals that were identified within the Lowell Forward plan, and maybe even, the housing production plan hasn't been adopted from the council, so we probably shouldn't do that yet. But at minimum, I think having the community housing goals section, at least reference the fact that there is a new master plan that did have a whole sort of housing component.
do you want to just suggest that we will actually need a motion to make the kind of housekeeping edits that were recommended? Do you want to make that motion and add to it that wherever there's a reference to the city's master plan, that it be updated to reflect the current master plan?
I will make that motion.
All right. And do we have a second?
I second.
All right. Very good. Any discussion on the motion? All right. I think we need a roll call. Yes.
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 All right. Very good. Yes, we are still a quorum. And any further comments? We keep saying planning board members, so I guess only member Tenzar can offer further comments. Do you have any? Otherwise, motion under number 7 from anybody? Do we have a second on that one? All right, all those in favor, say aye. All right, very good. Thank you all for a good, very good discussion.